Welcome to AI ConvoCast, where we bring you the latest in AI and tech innovation. Quick housekeeping. Check out the affiliate links in our description. Using them supports the show, and please don't forget to rate, review, and share if you like what you hear. Let's jump right in. Today we will be covering OpenAI's release of a sweeping 13-page policy blueprint, calling for robot taxes, public wealth funds, and a 4-day workweek. Sam Altman's Axios interview framing the whole thing as a superintelligence New Deal and the immediate wave of public reaction and skepticism that followed online. So on April 6th, OpenAI dropped a 13-page policy document with a pretty ambitious title, Industrial Policy for the Intelligence Age, Ideas to Keep People First. This is not a product launch or a model update. This is OpenAI stepping squarely into the world of economic policy and essentially telling Congress, here is how we think the government should adapt to a world where AI is doing more and more of the work humans used to do. The document lays out several major proposals. First, it calls for the creation of a national public wealth fund, seeded in part by contributions from AI companies and firms that heavily adopt AI. The idea is that as AI generates enormous profits concentrated among a relatively small number of companies, some of that wealth should be pooled into a fund that benefits the broader public. Second, and this is the one that got the most attention, the blueprint proposes taxes on automated labor, often referred to as robot taxes. The logic here is straightforward. Right now, a huge portion of government revenue comes from payroll taxes, meaning taxes on human workers' wages. If AI systems start replacing a significant number of those workers, the payroll tax base shrinks, and funding for things like Social Security and Medicaid could erode. OpenAI's proposal is to shift the tax base away from labor and toward capital gains and corporate income, essentially taxing the machines and the profits they generate rather than the people they replace. Third, the document encourages piloting a 32-hour workweek, a 4-day week, as a way to redistribute the productivity gains AI creates so that people work less rather than just getting displaced entirely. And fourth, it calls for faster expansion of the electric grid and AI infrastructure, framing AI as something closer to a public utility that requires coordinated public and private investment. The paper itself states, quote, as AI reshapes work and production, the composition of economic activity may shift, end quote. That is a pretty measured way of saying the economy could look fundamentally different in the coming years, and the government needs to be ready. Business Today described the document as a sweeping rethink of how economies distribute wealth and work. The timing is notable too. This lands as Congress is gearing up to debate national AI legislation, and it follows the White House's own AI framework released back on March 20th. OpenAI is clearly trying to get ahead of regulation and shape the conversation rather than simply respond to whatever lawmakers come up with. Now the document did not arrive in isolation. On the same morning, an Axios interview with Sam Altman went live, and it gave the whole thing a much more personal framing. Axios described the moment as something no tech titan has ever done. A CEO of a frontier AI company actively proposing redistribution mechanisms tied to the very technology he is building. They called it a Superintelligence New Deal, drawing a direct parallel to FDR-era reforms. Altman positioned the blueprint not as a final answer, but as a conversation starter. He reportedly said the document is not a prescription, but a starting point. The interview made clear that OpenAI sees superintelligence-level disruption as something that is coming, and that preventative action now is better than scrambling to respond after the economic damage is already underway. Axios wrote, quote, he is publishing a detailed blueprint for how government should tax, regulate, and redistribute the wealth, end quote. This also fits into a broader pattern of OpenAI increasing its presence in Washington and engaging more directly with policymakers. The company has been building out its government relations operation, and this document is arguably the most concrete policy vision any major AI lab has put forward to date. It is one thing to say AI will change the economy. It is another to publish a 13-page plan saying here is exactly how we think taxation and labor law should change in response. Now, as you might expect, the internet had thoughts. Within hours of the document going live, Reddit threads across multiple communities, including OpenAI's Singularity, R Technology, and ERER Artificial, were buzzing with reactions. The response was genuinely mixed. On the skeptical side, a lot of people questioned whether OpenAI would actually support higher corporate taxation on itself. Given the company's transition from a non-profit to a for-profit structure in recent years, some commenters saw the whole thing as strategic positioning, possibly aimed at getting ahead of regulation in a way that ultimately benefits OpenAI, or as public relations work ahead of a potential IPO. Fortune ran an analysis the same day with critics arguing the proposals could amount to what they called regulatory nihilism, meaning OpenAI gets to look responsible, while the actual policy suggestions remain vague enough to not really constrain the company. One Reddit user captured this cynical view pretty well, writing, quote, "Why are you mad at your $6.47 in monthly wealth fund payments?" End quote. But there was also a meaningful contingent of people who welcomed the conversation. Some commenters said they were glad to see these ideas being discussed seriously now, rather than after widespread job displacement has already happened. One user on the artificial intelligence subreddit wrote, quote, "I am glad it is being seriously discussed now," end quote. The general sentiment from this camp was that even if you do not trust OpenAI's motives completely, having robot taxes and public wealth funds enter the mainstream policy conversation is a net positive. The tension here is real and worth sitting with. You have a company that stands to profit enormously from AI adoption, and that same company is now telling the government how to manage the economic fallout of that adoption. Whether you see that as responsible leadership or self-interested maneuvering probably depends on how much faith you put in OpenAI's stated mission. Either way, the fact that these ideas are now being debated in Congress, in newsrooms, and across social media means the Overton window on AI economic policy has shifted meaningfully. Concepts like taxing automated labor and creating public wealth funds funded by AI profits are no longer fringe academic proposals. They are on the table, and the debate over how to implement them is just getting started. Thank you for listening to AI Convo Cast. Please don't forget to rate, review, and share if you like what you hear. Thanks, and hope to see you again next time.